So the topic today is the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Right, so like I was saying, I'm covering the 6 characteristics of devotional service as described in the first chapter of the book Nectar of Devotion. Now this book is a summary study of the book that Srila Rupa Goswami wrote, which is the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion. Sindhu is ocean, Amrita is like nectar, Rasa is mellows, and Bhakti is devotional service. And the purpose of this book is essentially to reawaken our original love of God, right? So we, as spirit souls, our original constitutional position is eternal loving servant of God. So the purpose of this book is to help us reawaken that love by following the practices laid out in the book. Now, just a little bit about the structure of this book. It's because it's using the analogy of the ocean. It's sort of splitting the ocean into 4 quadrants: the northern side, eastern side, western side, and southern side. So the book, the Nectar of Devotion, so the first 20 chapters first 19 chapters covers the eastern side of the ocean. And that section, the eastern side, covers 4 topics, and it's broken out into waves, like waves in the ocean. So the first section or first wave is an overview of devotion. It's called Samanya Bhakti. The second wave is devotional service in practice, Sadhana Bhakti. Devotional service in ecstasy, which is Bhava Bhakti. And devotional service in love of God, which is Prema Bhakti. So you see that progression, that kind of advancement coming down. Okay, so in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there is a verse which we can recite together. Kleshadni Subhada Moksha Lagukrat Sudurlubha Sandrananda Visheshatma Sri Krishna Karshani Chasa. So this is the description of the 6 characteristics. So the translation is: pure devotional service is characterized by 1. Relief from all suffering. 2. Bestowal of all auspiciousness. 3. Belittling liberation. 4. Very rare and difficult to attain. 5. Incalculably condensed bliss. And 6. The power of attracting Sri Krishna. Now you see that this verse, and this presentation will expand on these 6 characteristics. So in addition to these 6 characteristics, there is also a definition of devotional service in Nectar of Devotion. So everyone knows, or everyone may know the verse, Anya Bilashita Sunyam, Jnana Kamadi Anavritam, Anukulyena Krishnanu, Shilanam Bhakti Uttama. So briefly, right, Anya Bilashita Sunyam refers to free from material desires. And then Jnana Karmadi Anavritam refers to it's free from philosophical speculation, jnana, and fruitive acts. So the karma, anavritam, that part, karmadi anavritam. So it's free from three things: material desires, karmic or fruitive acts, and jnana, philosophical speculation, like impersonal jnana. And then anukulyena refers to the intention to please Krishna. Krishna anu is with favorable attitude. So we want to please Krishna with a favorable attitude. And then Shilanam Bhakti is with continuous service. And lastly, Uttama is the first class. So this is the pure devotional service. So the first characteristic is Kleshagni. So the meaning of that is that it destroys material suffering. Now, if we think about when we suffer, there is a root cause to all of our suffering. So in the book it lays it out. Like this diagram is actually a nice way of, so I'll kind of walk you through that. So avidya means ignorance. So what do we mean by ignorance? Does it mean that we don't know calculus, therefore we're in ignorance? Or we don't know biology? No. So the ignorance that is mainly referring to is the false ego. And what does false ego mean? Like when we associate or when we identify ourselves with a body, saying, I am this body, I am American, I am Indian, I am fat, I'm skinny, I'm dark, like so bodily designations, that's kind of ignorance, right? Sourced from the false ego. So because of that ignorance, all these sinful desires happen and come up in our mind. And those sinful desires are called bijam. So when we have sinful desire, and I'll give you an example, right? Say you've got a person and he wants to be wealthy, right? But he doesn't want to do all the hard work to become wealthy, so he thinks, okay, let me rob a bank. That's an easy way for me to get rich. So he'll have that sinful desire to go and rob a bank. Then he'll think of it so much, he'll come up with this plan inside of his brain of how he's going to pull off that robbery. Then he actually acts on that desire. So that's papam. The actual sinful reaction takes place. He goes to the bank and he robs the bank and he takes the money. Next that leads to something called aprarabdha, or unmanifest reaction. So he's committed this sin. He hasn't received the fruitive result of that sinful action yet, right? Maybe he got away, so he hasn't been caught yet. He's sitting on a pile of cash in his bedroom, and he's like, okay, great, I'm rich. So at this point, two things can happen. One is he can continue on this cycle. So he'll like, okay, I got a lot of money, I robbed one bank, maybe I can rob another bank. He's got that proclivity now to do more and more sinful acts, the same act again and again. So that's what we call kutam. Right? So now he's got that proclivity, he may do it again, and the cycle continues, right? The sinful desire comes up, he acts on that desire, he robs another bank, and so on. At some point, all of this may catch up with him, and he may get caught, at which point it goes down to that lower arrow where it says prarabdha, it becomes manifest. Now he's going to suffer the result of his sinful actions, and you see this, the line going to suffering. So he gets caught, goes to jail, and so on, right? So now he's suffering the result of his action. So this is what is described. This is the process. Now, how does bhakti come into this? So bhakti, or devotional service, what is explained is that it destroys material suffering. So firstly, it can destroy the root cause of this issue, which is ignorance. So it gets at the seed of the issue here, right? If you don't hit the root of the problem, it can resurface, right, with anything. If you don't, like, if you work in a professional environment and there's an issue with a system, you have to end up doing something called a root cause analysis. In that way, you want to figure out what the root cause of the issue was so it doesn't happen again. So same thing here. If you don't hit the root cause of the problem, it's going to happen again. So bhakti is so powerful that it gets to the root cause of the issue, which is our ignorance, our ego, right? False ego. Secondly, not only does it attack the root, it attacks the actual sinful reactions. So the aprarabdha, the manifest reaction, the unmanifest reaction. So it destroys all of those things one by one, starting with the most recent. Right? So Krishna says in the scriptures, just as a blazing fire turns firewood into ashes, similarly devotion unto me completely burns to ashes sins committed by my devotees. So he says himself, right, Krishna. And then how does prarabdha manifest itself, right? There's different types of suffering, and you can guess, right? So some of the ones mentioned in the book are like low birth, disease, like legal problems, or maybe somebody has physical issues or physical deformities, so on, right? So those are different types of suffering that one can endure. It can also be, mental suffering in addition to physical suffering. It's also, as I said, kutam, right, which is the proclivity to perform more sinful acts. One of the examples I wanted to just mention is the story of Dhritarashtra. Right? Everyone knows that he was blind and he had 100 sons, and those 100 sons were killed during the battle at Kurukshetra. So what was the backstory of that, right? So 50 lifetimes prior to that, he was a tyrant king. And that tyrant king one day came across a swan and its 100 children, cygnets. And he ordered that swan be blinded, and also its 100 cygnets, its children, be killed. Just for the fun of it. So that happened, and then he didn't suffer any kind of reaction for a very long time, right? 50 lifetimes is like a really, really long time. And then obviously, as we know, in the Mahabharata and everything, right? Like what happened to him. So he suffered this reaction after many, many lifetimes. So basically, it's like if you imagine like those silos that you have with grains that you see when you go in the countryside. So all the grains kind of maybe going from the top, but then like slowly they kind of sift down and come out the bottom, right? It's the same thing, our sinful acts, they're kind of going at the top, but they don't fructify until much, much later. And it could be many lifetimes, right? Or it could be the same lifetime, but it could be many lifetimes. At that point, you don't even know what you did that caused that suffering in the first place. You have no idea. It could be in the next life. So sometimes you see people, okay, I see a young child or somebody that seems very innocent, they haven't committed any crime, and they're suffering some disease. And you're like, oh, well, God, why is God doing this to a small child that hasn't hurt anyone? But we don't know the whole story. We don't know their previous lives, and we don't know anything, right? So we have to look at it from that perspective. So, and one other thing I wanted to mention is atonement, right? So we can atone for sinful acts in various ways, right? And like classic example is like with Christians, they go to church, they go to confession, they confess to the priest that I've committed so and so sinful acts, and then in that way there's atonement. But the problem is that atonement, happens, but there's no treatment of the root cause, right? So it's like the elephant taking a bath, right? Elephant takes a bath, cleans itself, immediately gets out and covers itself in dust again, right? So it's the same thing, right? You're not really fixing the issue. It's just leading to more and more sinful acts. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. So the next characteristic is subhada, bestows auspiciousness. So what does that mean, auspiciousness, right? So in the purport, it says, like, the learned sages have described the meaning of auspiciousness as in several contexts. One is love for the entire creation, caring, affection for all living entities, saintly character, and happiness, and there's other qualities, right? So when we say love for the entire creation, a pure devotee has love for every living being. And their goal, especially, the Uttama Adhikaris, right? Their goal is to preach and to spread Krishna consciousness to benefit in, humanity, right? So and if you think of like what's said about Krishna consciousness is like considered the highest welfare activity, because if you think about different charities that exist, right? They treat or they give people temporary help, right, in the form of clothing, money, food, right, helping them, which is all great, right, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't help the person in the long run, right? And when I say long run, like helping them in their spiritual life so that they can get out of this world of material suffering. The material world is called dukkhala and vishashvatam, meaning it's a place of suffering, right? And if you think about it honestly, this place is a world of suffering, right? It's sprinkled in there are moments of happiness, but more or less it's a world of suffering. So the pure devotees, have compassion for all the living entities, and their goal is to help them make spiritual progress so that they can go back to the spiritual world, essentially, right? And in the spiritual world, they can live a life full of bliss, knowledge, and eternity, right? There's no temporary in the spiritual world. Everything is permanent. Right. So if you see here this picture of Lord Chaitanya, right? He's in the Jarikhand forest. He was chanting the Lord's names, and you see all the animals are dancing and singing along with him, right? Not just the animals, the trees and everything. These are all living entities with souls, right? And each soul, the eternal position, as I said, is eternal loving servant of the Lord. So when they hear the Lord's names being sung by a pure devotee, right, such as Lord Chaitanya, it goes right to the heart, and it awakens that love within the heart of all those living entities, right? Not just people. So, Lord Chaitanya is a sort of living example of subhada. Saintly character is another aspect. So, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of a boy, young boy, Krishna conscious boy. He may not be very educated in terms of material sense, he may not have a degree, but just because of by way of the fact that he may take up Krishna consciousness, or he may accept Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, instantly he can give up sort of any sort of sinful activities that may be there, right? Like meat eating or intoxication or anything like that, right? So conversely, you can see like very well educated people with big degrees, they're not able to give up. They actually often have very big substance abuse issues and things like that, right? So you see the power of devotional service. And then when Srila Prabhupada, when he came to New York City back in the late 60s, right, he was in the Bowery X section of the city, right? And that time there was a lot of, it was a pretty seedy area, a lot of hippies. All those hippies were, taking a lot of drugs and intoxication and so on. But the few of them that started associating with Srila Prabhupada, they were very quickly able to give up all of that stuff, become vegetarian, become pure devote, almost, very nice devotees within a very short period of time, right? So that talks to the power of the association of a pure devotee that was Srila Prabhupada. So the next characteristic is moksha lagutakrit. And the meaning of this is disregards liberation and brings happiness. So the pure devotees, essentially what they want is to please Krishna, right? They don't have they don't really want to go back to Godhead. That's not their primary goal. Their primary goal is to serve Krishna and to bring the suffering souls back to Him, to help them. So when you talk about liberation, right? Liberation or moksha, what we're saying is impersonal liberation or merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord, or when they say becoming one with the Lord, right? They have no interest in that. When you reach the stage of pure devotional service, you have no interest in moksha. And the reason is that when you reach the stage of liberation and you merge into that Brahman effulgence, you don't lose your individual identity, but you lose the ability to serve the Lord as a servant, as a loving servant. You lose the ability to have that personal interaction with the Lord. And that to a devotee or pure devotee is hell, right? So they have no interest in that. The other thing here is that there are 5 different types of liberation as mentioned here. Sayuja, Salokya, Sarupya, Samipya, Shasti Mukti. And so the meaning of what those mean are, so Sayuja means to become one with the Lord, as I just explained. And then Salokya is to live on the same planet as the Lord. Sarupya is to obtain the same bodily features of the Lord. So if you think about the Vishnu Dutas, so they also look like Lord Vishnu, right? They have four arms and they have that bluish hue skin and they have spiritual bodies. So that's achieving that. Shashti is to have the same opulences as the Lord. Samipya to have constant association. So by devotional service you can achieve some of these anyway. But the point is that the pure devotees don't have interest in achieving these mystic cities. The other thing is, here is Rupa Goswami explains there are 3 types of happiness. One is material happiness. 2 is happiness obtained from liberation. And 3rd is happiness from devotional service. So the first 2, material happiness and that obtained from liberation, are even when one is liberated, they can still fall down. And they often do. So therefore it's regarded as temporary. The Mayavadis or / impersonalists, they often become entangled in mundane affairs such as like political activities or social welfare activities, because it's said that they don't really derive real happiness from their impersonal understanding. And therefore they start falling into these other activities. Whereas if you look at a pure devotee, they don't actually have that problem where they lose interest or they don't have that happiness that they get from the pure from bhakti. So therefore you can see that that's why a lot of the times impersonalists they fall down from their position. So Sudolabha is the next characteristic, and the meaning of that is it's rarely attained. Now, when in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes 4 types of people that come to him. The distressed, the wealth seekers, the inquisitive people, and the knowledge seekers, or jnanis. So, Lord Krishna, when these people come to him, especially those like, somebody is looking for wealth, or they're in some kind of situation where they're distressed, Krishna very easily will help those people. If one prays to them, one comes to him. And even people come to his lieutenants, such as Lord Shiva, right? If you go to Lord Shiva and you pray and you please him, he'll very easily give you material benedictions, right? So, but the Lord does not give bhakti very easily, right? It's very rarely attained, because the Lord becomes purchased by someone who has pure devotional service. And you see the picture here of Mother Yashoda with Lord Krishna. She had pure devotion for Krishna, right? Everything she did 24 hours while she was awake was to please her son Krishna, right? So because of that, Lord Krishna is purchased by her love. She can control him through her love. When he was naughty, right? If the Damodar Lila, he broke the pot of butter, and then he's being chased around by Mother Yashoda, and eventually she binds him. She's able to bind the Supreme Personality of Godhead only because of the power of her love. So, therefore, Krishna is not going to give that kind of power to someone very easily. You have to earn it, right? So that's why it's rarely attained. And so if you see in the 3rd bullet, even though one executes sadhana bhakti with attachment, until one has intense ashakti or attachment, in that bhakti, the Lord does not give bhav bhakti. Bhav bhakti is like the 2nd highest stage. Prema bhakti is the topmost, pure devotion. So, until you reach the stage of intense attachment to the Lord, you don't qualify for the next step, which is bhav bhakti. And there are 9 stages in this process, and it starts with shraddha, or faith. Then it goes to sadhu sangha, which is association with devotees. Bhajana kriya, which is performance of devotional service. Anartha nivritti, decreasing of unwanted attachments. Nishtha is the next stage, steadiness in your devotional service, right? You're constantly serving. Ruchi, you develop a taste, right? You start, like we do chanting now, right, as a mechanical activity, but we don't really have the taste for it. At least I don't. But at some point you start developing that taste for it. Then after that, ashakti, attachment. So you develop that love, that real strong attachment to serve the Lord. And then followed by bhava, which is love of God. And the topmost level is prema. This is pure love of Krishna. So the next characteristic is Sandra Ananda Vishesh Atma. And the meaning of this is it manifests condensed bliss. Right, so in this picture here, you can see Lord Chaitanya, he's collapsed, and he's kind of sweating and stuff, right? So Lord Chaitanya, if you don't know, right? So he appeared in the sort of mood of Radharani. Radharani is the topmost devotee of Lord Krishna. So she would experience this amazing, topmost level of love for Krishna, and Lord Krishna wanted to experience what it felt like to experience that love. So he came to this world as a devotee of the Lord Chaitanya, in the combined mood of Lord Krishna and Radharani, so that he could experience what she experiences. So when he would go out on Sankirtan, often he would experience these ecstatic symptoms of condensed bliss. And those symptoms included like sweating, horripilation, which I think it means goosebumps, hair standing on end, right? Like, you know, when you get that pure exhilaration, right? You get goosebumps. So that, tears in the eyes, he would howl, he would even have like bodily sort of temporary deformities. He would fall down while chanting. So all of these like are, and it sounds painful, but it was actually very blissful, right? It's so powerful that, you know, your body can't almost handle it, it seems. So Srila Rupa Goswami says that the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, right? That liberation that we talked about. Even if you multiply that happiness by trillions of times, it still doesn't compare to one tiny atomic fraction of the happiness that is derived from this Sandananda Visheshatma, this condensed bliss. So there's not even a comparison of the two. The bliss you get from moksha or liberation is zero compared to the bliss that you get from this pure devotional service. And then sometimes, like I was just thinking, right? Sometimes, you know, you see people who turn to drugs, right? Illicit drugs like cocaine, heroin, and things, right? They're looking for that high, extreme high, right? That pleasure that you get. Obviously, there's severe downfalls to doing that, right? People OD and people have addictions and so on, right? But essentially, people are looking for the pleasure, right? They're looking for this bliss, because essentially what everyone has come from the spiritual world, right? They experienced that bliss, and now they don't have it, right? Now they're in the material world, but they're still looking for that feeling. But they're looking for it in the wrong places, so they turn to drugs and so on. When Srila Prabhupada came to New York and he was preaching to the young people, the hippies and so on, you know, he realized that they're looking for this sort of high. So he, you know, explained that, you know, through devotional service you can achieve even a much better high, and you don't need drugs to do it, right? You just need to be a pure devotee. You need to perform, chant Hare Krishna. And that's, you know, that was a good way of preaching, and that was very effective. So the next one is Sri Krishna Akarshani. It attracts Sri Krishna. So bhakti is called Sri Krishna Akarshani because it makes Sri Krishna addicted to love and brings him under the control of his devotees. Like I gave the example earlier of Mother Yashoda. Right? Here in the picture you see the Pandavas, right? Lord Krishna was very close to them. He played, he played with them, he ate with them, he slept beside them, talked with them, as friends, as buddies, right? He was very attracted to their friendship because they had so much love for him. Their love for him attracted him to them, right? So, and therefore, and then as is mentioned in the third bullet, Krishna is called Madan Mohan, right? And Radharani, but Radharani can attract even Krishna, so she's called Madan Mohan Mohini, right? The attractor of Cupid. So Krishna is Madan Mohan, the attractor of Cupid, right? So I gave the example of the Pandavas, right? And then if you think of, like what I was thinking also is that the pure devotees, they can actually speak to Krishna, or they can speak to the deities. And there's many examples in our scriptures. If you think, so Sanatana Goswami, he had a deity, Madan Mohan, and there's like a famous story where he was talking to the deity. The deity was complaining about the lack of salt in the food, and then he's complaining back, well, I'm so poor, what do you expect? How am I supposed to get salt? So they're having this kind of two-way communication. And another example is when Srila Prabhupada was here, one time I think he was in the LA temple and there was a kirtan going on, and then they were very close to the deities. So a lot of devotees were right behind him, and he's actually conversing with the deities. Srila Prabhupada. He's asking them, how are you doing, and how are the devotees treating you, and so on. And so some of the devotees overheard him having this conversation with the deities. And Srila Prabhupada says in his books many times that you can actually speak to God, right, if you become a pure devotee. So if you develop that devotion, like you can attract Krishna to the point where you can actually talk to him like a friend. So just to summarize, I've got 2 minutes. So the Kleshagni, it destroys material suffering, right? And then is explained in the whole process of the root cause, which is ignorance, leads to sinful desires and sinful acts, and then aparabdha, which is unmanifested reaction, or kutam, which leads to more sinful acts. Supada bestows auspiciousness. We talked about what those auspiciousness means. Brings happiness, compassion for all living entities, and bhakti being the highest welfare activity. Moksha lagutakrit disregards liberation. Right? Devotees don't have any interest in achieving moksha. Right? Sudurlabha, rarely attained, right? Because Krishna doesn't want to be controlled so easily by anyone and everyone, right? He makes bhakti hard, you have to work for it. And we describe those 9 stages of bhakti that we go through from Shraddha down to Prema. Sandra Ananda Visheshatma is that manifestation of condensed bliss, right? So once you achieve that stage, you may experience those types of symptoms of condensed bliss. Pure devotees, they don't show off this thing, but they experience it, right? And then Sri Krishna Akarshani is the 6th one, attracts Sri Krishna. So, we can become very close to Krishna as a friend, right? We may not have him walking in front of us like the Pandavas, but we can, like I gave the example, you can actually end up speaking to the deities, you can develop that friendship directly with the Lord. So, conclusion is that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and Lord Chaitanya, this very easy process to achieve pure devotional service. You have to work, but compared to other types of yoga and so on, this is the easiest process. And it's analogous, they say, to kind of taking an elevator versus climbing up the stairs. So all we have to do, as you said here, is to chant Hare Krishna, serve the devotees, right? Follow the program that Srila Prabhupada has given us. And what is that program, right? We come to the temple, we attend the class, we learn the scriptures, we eat prasadam, right? Which is mercy of the Lord. We dance in front of the deities, right? It's all like you're doing it even without realizing, right? Srinathji ki jai, Sri Bhavanitai ki jai, Ram Sita Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. So I'll end there, and if there's any questions I can take. You have to fix this. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
Question is, so Krishna performed many superhuman acts, right, with the Pandavas. Since his mother was from the house of fire and all that. But the Bhagavad starts later on.
No questions, comments?
Krishna says, I treated you as my friend. And you know that the God. Even in the second chapter, I think he says, I accept you as my guru or something.
Come closer, come closer. Prabhu, come closer. Come closer.
Can you explain that? Isn't that like a little bit of why is Arjuna acting almost sarcastically? Because he already kind of knows that Krishna is not an ordinary person. Because even as a baby, Krishna did several superhuman things. So how do we understand this?
So I think your question is, Arjuna kind of knew that Lord Krishna is not ordinary, he's Supreme Lord, but still he acted with him as if he wasn't? Or
Still in, he knew, still in Bhagavad Gita, he says that I treated you as a friend, I joked with you, I sat with you on the same bed, we played games.
yeah.
But so is Arjuna made to like act in play a role like in a drama, or how do we understand that?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. I think my understanding is that he does understand, like Krishna is not an ordinary person, but I guess at the same time, because like even with the devotees in Vrindavan, right? They don't really realize Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like they just kind of know him as Krishna, and everyone loves him. Right? So maybe it's a similar thing with like Arjuna, that it's his friend, his close friend. Maybe in his heart he realizes he's the Supreme Lord, but then on the day-to-day level, he's interacting with him as a friend. I don't know if you want to add something.
No, Arjun was a pure devotee, but so that Krishna could speak the Bhagavad Gita, he did play that role. I mean, he was, for temporarily, forgot his real position and so forth, but he played that role. And then after Krishna gave him some of that knowledge, he's realizing that actually Krishna, my friend, he's the Supreme Lord. And I've been treating him like, so informally. It's like a friend, and he felt uncomfortable doing that. So that's why he's offering those prayers to say, what have I done? You're such a great person, I'm such a minor person, and why am I treating like this? And eventually Krishna doesn't like that, right? So he, just like in Mother Yashoda, same thing, when she sees the universal form, she gets shocked and he's the Supreme Lord. Then Krishna covers her again because says, no, I don't want you to think of me as the Lord. So similar idea, right? So yes, Arjun is a pure devotee, but he's playing that role.
He's playing that role. I think that's.
Yes.
The question is to get all the 6 colors to each. So do that one have to be in Bhava Bhakti stage, or it has to be in the Prema Bhakti stage?
I think some of them start working before, right? Like if you start performing devotional service, all the sinful reactions start to be destroyed immediately, right? You don't have to reach the stage of prema for that effect to start happening. So it depends. Like the condensed bliss stage, yes, you probably need to be bhava or prema stage. But if you start chanting Hare Krishna now, you're already destroying sinful acts, right? Millions of them from so many millions of lifetimes. So yeah, not all of them require that you reach that stage. Bestowing auspiciousness, right? That, yeah, I mean that I don't think you need to be at that stage to have that characteristic. Yeah. Okay, so Prabhuji explained that the first two are sadhana bhakti, the second are bhava bhakti, and the last two Prema Bhakti. So that's the grouping. So yeah, there's your answer. Yes. I think that would be like, so Lord has, yeah, so Lord has, so Bhagavan, right, he has opulences, right? Yeah, so so, strength, wealth, like those things, right? Fame, renunciation, those opulences of Bhagavan, so you develop those kinds of opulences at that level.
It's equal qualities, right? One equal qualities, nobody but Krishna can have. I mean, you can have similar types of opulences, but you still never become equal.
Yeah, you don't become equal, but
even some of the great kings in the past, they were so opulent, right? In one sense, they had so much wealth and so many, some things like so many wives as well. All of these kinds of things are approaching the opulence of the world, so they never become it.
yeah. Yes.
Can you go one more slide?
This
No,
one.
sorry. No, the one with the flow chart and the diagram.
Oh, okay. Sorry. This one.
Yeah, I just have a question. I was asked this question by a friend of mine. Does the action create the reaction, or even a desire?
The desire sort of leads to the action, right? You start thinking about like the sinful act, then you act on it. So that's the action.
But if you don't convert it to an action, then you're okay.
Yeah. Then you're okay because you actually haven't done anything wrong. I mean,
Right. And
all of us have this stupid thoughts. They go through, we ignore it, right? We don't act on it.
And sometimes, though, you do a sinful reaction without a sinful desire because you just know, or maybe, how is that created?
Sorry, I didn't get.
So sometimes you don't realize you're doing a papa, right? So because you're just not aware, so you didn't have the desire, but you did something out of just not knowing, right? Out of ignorance. So how does that differentiate here? Because not a sinful desire leading to sinful action, but like
I mean, I would say you're still subject to the law, right?
Okay.
I mean, like you may be speeding 65 on a 25 road, right? And you may not have seen the sign, but you're still gonna get pulled over.
So it's the action truly which can give you the okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Prabhupada often gave the finger that, if a child puts his finger in the fire,
Yeah.
he's going to get wet.
Yeah. So I didn't repeat the question if anyone wants to. No. Yeah. Anyway, I think time's up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandan Acarya Prabhu. It seems, the less time I give people, the better the class is, So anyway, but it's wonderful class, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So, loud Haribol for Nandan Acarya.